Aaron Rodgers relies on his accurate arm to deliver daggers in the regular season, but even before September 1st, the Packers quarterback appears to be in mid-season form. Tight spirals, threaded needles, improv acumen, all part of his game and all displayed in preseason action and training camp. While the preseason reps are pretty much meaningless to Aaron Rodgers and Randall Cobb, they are instrumental to Packers backup quarterback Brett Hundley. Though he could not lead Green Bay to a win, he gained valuable experience. The Packers don't play in Denver very often, only every 8 years as the regular season schedule goes. Visiting an AFC foe is different, and playing at altitude is different too. Many players complained about the thin air that they didn't expect to be as big an issue as it was. The Packers defense delivers on a day in which the Green Bay offense failed to score in the first half at home for the first time in 13 years. The defense turned in its best performance in 25 games, holding Seattle to 9 points, forcing 5 3-and-outs. In his first 2 career games against the Packers, the Seahawks quarterback had a rating over 110, but now in the last 4 matchups, he has a 55 rating against that Green Bay defense. And pictures and video really do not do Mercedes-Benz Stadium justice. It's just too big and just too gaudy. The circular video board above us, picture you're at Lambeau Field and the Jumbotrons on either end. Well, this is like 10 of them wrapped in a circle, and the opening in the roof goes from goal line to goal line. It really gives the stadium an outdoor atmosphere, but the Packers expect this stadium to be as loud as any they've ever played in. Well, Chris, it's really easy to look forward to this game in this environment. I've been looking forward to it ever since the schedule came out in April. Last year, the Falcons averaged more than a field goal per possession. That's right, 3.2 points per possession all season long, en route to 540 total points. The Falcons scored 30 plus in 11 of their 16 games, but they have lost last year's offensive coordinator Kyle Shanahan, who is now the head coach of the 49ers. And when the Packers showed up at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, they knew it would be a very difficult game to win against the Falcons, and that was before the team had to scratch both starting tackles due to injuries, and before Jordy Nelson, Mike Daniels, and Kentrell Brice went down to injuries during the game. The Packers had a nightmarish start and a decent finish, and at the end of the day, the Packers are 1-1, and as Bill Belichick is wont to say, on to Cincinnati. The Bengals, the only team in the NFL without a touchdown through 2 weeks. 0-7 lifetime in overtime games, Aaron Rodgers had experienced tons of heartbreak in extra time, often playing spectator in those extra sessions, but not tonight. Despite losing the coin toss, the Packers defense stood tall, and after that, nothing could stop Aaron Rodgers from getting off the schneid. As the Packers beat the desperate Bengals for a win that means more in Titletown than a check in the correct column. There are 2 things Aaron Rodgers had never done: beat the Bengals and win an overtime game. Despite throwing a pick-6 for just the 2nd time in his career and trailing 21-7, Rodgers accomplished both. And after the comeback against Cincinnati, the Packers quarterback has now beaten all 31 opponents in the NFL. The Packers had given up 5.5 sacks per contest in the 4 games previously missed during the career of starting left tackle David Bakhtiari, but with 4 guards on the field and no true tackles against the Bears, they kept Aaron Rodgers upright for the most part. The Packers may have found something with rookie running back Aaron Jones, not taking anything away from the injured Ty Montgomery out with the broken ribs, but Jones showed vision, burst, blocking ability, and intuition in the Packers win. Montgomery has only once topped the 125 rushing yards that Jones had today in his first start.
He's great.
There is absolutely no positive way to spin it. The Packers season shaken up by the loss of Aaron Rodgers. Green Bay has to move on, and Brett Hundley is now the man. The 3rd-year quarterback threw his first career touchdown pass on Sunday, but Hundley also threw 3 interceptions. In case you're curious, Rodgers has thrown 3 picks in the game only 3 times in his entire career. Chris, we're not here discussing the story of the day as we so often do on Cover 2. This is really the story of the season. And I'm not going to lie, the post-game locker room was like a funeral. And while some players had to battle emotion speaking to reporters, not so for Mike McCarthy. The head coach speaking in defiant tones in his post-game press conference. He's not about to give up on the season after losing 2-time MVP Aaron Rodgers to the 2nd broken collarbone of his career. Packers' stated goal every year is to make it to the Super Bowl, and that big game will be played in this building in February, though the Packers' attendance in that contest seems highly unlikely. But don't forget, this is a resilient Green Bay squad. They still made the playoffs when Rodgers broke his collarbone in 2013. They've made the playoffs 8 consecutive seasons. The Packers locker room came together in 2013 and made the playoffs. There was also a lot of scoreboard watching that season. The Packers really have to wrap their heads around the fact that they have to move forward with Brett Hundley. If you'll remember back to 2013 when Rodgers broke his left collarbone, the backup plan was very very much a fluid situation. The week after Rodgers' injury, Seneca Wallace started. The next week in New York, Scott Tolzien started. The following week against the Vikings, Matt Flynn took over to make it 4 quarterbacks in 4 weeks. But that is not the plan this time around. Brett Hundley is in his 3rd season in Green Bay, and he is now the man until Aaron Rodgers can return, if he can return at all. And if you want to make Mike McCarthy really mad, just ask him one more time if he wants to bring in an outsider to fill in for Aaron Rodgers. The answer is no. The backup plan is in place. Brett Hundley's first career start started well, but the 75-yard scoring drive to open the game was fool's gold for a Packers offense that gained just 180 total yards the rest of the day. The Packers' offensive troubles against the Saints were with the passing game. In his first career start, Brett Hundley averaged a meager 3.5 yards per attempt. That's less than half of Aaron Rodgers' career average. Mike Daniels deserves more credit. Somehow, he has still not been voted to a Pro Bowl, though he's been the Packers' best defender for a few years now. His game face is legendary, and he can talk a big game too. But beyond the bluster, Daniels has a deep burning passion to take his defense to greater heights, and it all starts with his approach to each opponent.
I don't like anybody.
Since Daniels joined the Packers, the team has performed quite well on defense in divisional rivalry games, giving up 4 fewer points versus the NFC North than against the rest of the league. By the time Brett Hundley got things going in the passing game, the game was out of hand. It took the Packers more than 50 minutes to find the end zone, but took Detroit less than 2 minutes to answer, driving the final nails in the coffin. Brett Hundley failed to throw for a touchdown pass and has 0 tossing touchdowns in his 2 games as a starter. The Packers needed this win, make no mistake. Desperation was in the air as the Packers were staring down the barrel of a losing record, but the aerial inefficiencies that had plagued backup-turned-starter Brett Hundley seemed to have finally finished in the 4th quarter as he completed his first touchdown pass since Minnesota and completed his longest downfield throw of his career. Hundley in the 4th quarter got it going, and the Packers head home feeling good. The Packers' win helps them avoid a 3rd divisional loss, and that's important because no team in NFC North history has ever won the division with 3 divisional losses. At Soldier Field, Dave Schrader, Action 2 Sports. Dom Capers' defense woke up in the Windy City. An anemic pass rush finally found its footing on the soggy turf at Soldier Field. After just 4 sacks in the last 5 games combined, the Packers' defense had 5 today against Bears rookie Mitch Trubisky. The Packers marched the ball down the field on their opening drive. Brett Hundley sparkling with long completions of 17 and 33 yards, but the red zone disaster that ended that drive ended any offensive optimism on the day. It's been a long time since Mike McCarthy has had such a bitter pill to swallow. 11 years to the day since his offense was last shut out. The coach watches as his team puts up a goose egg, turning it over 5 times. There are often bright spots in any loss and points to improve in any win, but the Packers' punchless offense offering nothing to lean back on, and now Green Bay heads on the road for 3 of its next 4. Let's face facts. Mike McCarthy is a highly successful NFL head coach, but as he returns to his hometown, no one expects the Packers to beat the Steelers. The Packers are 14-point underdogs for the first time in 7 years, but receiver Davante Adams doesn't care what you or I or Vegas thinks. He's faced adversity before. Speaking of adversity, the doubting of Davante was at an all-time high 2 years ago when on Thanksgiving night, Davante the Dropper cost the Packers a chance to beat the Bears on Brett Favre's jersey retirement night. A lot has changed since then. Adams is the 15th leading receiver in the NFL right now, but the Packers must contend with the NFL's top receiver, Antonio Brown.
And they will.
Here in the locker room with Richard Rodgers today, the Packers fight hard against the Steelers. What do you take away from this game? It took the 2nd longest field goal in Heinz Field history to beat the Packers at the Horn. This was not what people expected. The Packers entered as 2 touchdown underdogs for the first time in 7 years, but number 7, Brett Hundley, turned in his best performance of the year with 3 touchdown passes, and the defense forced 3 turnovers. It's a loss, but the Packers gaining optimism. If the Packers play like this, they'll beat the Buccaneers and beat the Browns and give Aaron Rodgers a chance to return to run the table for a hopeful postseason berth. As we saw in pregame warm-ups, Aaron Rodgers starting to throw. He cut it loose for throws over 50 yards here in Pittsburgh. The Packers get the loss, but a lot of optimism moving forward, the opposite of last week. Against the worst pass defense in the NFL, Brett Hundley has his worst day as a passer, only 84 yards. But the run game, defense, and special teams all deliver as the Packers keep their postseason hopes intact with a crazy win at Lambeau Field. It turns out Aaron Jones shares more in common with Aaron Rodgers than just a first name and birthday. They're both clutch. Both celebrated the birthdays yesterday. Rodgers by practicing for the first time since his injury. Jones by returning from injury today and then scoring the winning touchdown on his only touch. 10 wins, that's what Mike McCarthy thinks it'll take to make the playoffs. With zero margin for error, the Packers eke out an overtime win over the Bucs to hopefully start a December to remember to run the table for a second straight season to make the playoffs. On paper, Brett Hundley was supposed to build on last week's success, facing today the worst pass defense in the NFL. Instead, 199 yards on the ground paved the way. An ugly air effort matters little, though. The win is big. And welcome back to Sunday Sports Night Cover 2. Pleased to be joined by left guard Lane Taylor, the Taylor of the trenches. The game plan fit late today for you guys. How much did that win mean to your team moving forward? A must win?
Oh, absolutely.
Welcome back to Cover 2. The Packers defense deserves plenty of credit for keeping the score close before the offense flipped a switch in the clutch. 7 sacks today, the second most in a game in franchise history. What are we to make
It's like having a substitute
That's
teacher.
right, we're taking his notes. Substitute teacher, throwing them at
What are we to make of Brett Hundley? Brett Hundley, home versus the road, is not what you would expect in his starts. The passer rating at home is just 57. The passer rating on the road, 106. What gives?
He hasn't thrown a touchdown yet at home.
And here in Cleveland, yesterday I visited the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. If you're wondering what's that have to do with football, well, the Rolling Stones once sang, you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you might find you get what you need. That's exactly what happened. For the second week in a row, the Packers with some very iffy play, but in the end, they make the plays that matter and get a walk-off win to keep their playoff hopes alive.
This team has a lot of fight.
What can you say? The Packers like to make it look hard. Against the 0-12 Browns, the Packers looked like they'd be the losing team today until they pulled out a win. Down 14 in the fourth quarter, Brett Hundley brings them back with all the clutch plays in the end going Green Bay's way. It wasn't always pretty. That's the truth, but it sure was a lot of fun to watch. Brett Hundley now 3-4 as a starter. That's about what you could ask and expect of a backup quarterback until Aaron Rodgers comes back. Now the question is, will he come back? He's eligible to return next week in Carolina. So the Packers were less than 30 yards away from forcing overtime in comeback fashion for a third straight game, but alas, the never say die Packers, playing with fire again, get burned this time. As you said, Geronimo Allison, the fumble, ending Green Bay's chances here in Charlotte, and now their playoff hopes, those chances about 1,000,000 to 1. So we hadn't seen this from Aaron Rodgers in a long time. Heck, we hadn't seen him on the field in a long time. That's 8 weeks, but I'm talking 8 years since Aaron Rodgers last threw 3 interceptions in a game. That was the 2009 season, a year that saw the Packers start a streak of consecutive playoff appearances. They'd reached the postseason 8 straight years, but it looks like that streak will die now after Packers turnovers kill their chances in Carolina. The Packers' plans to close out the season strong face bitter cold and a bitter enemy in the home finale. A cold night at Lambeau Field, 10 degrees, 0-degree wind chill at kick, only colder as the night wore on. The Vikings get their first shutout in 24 years, and the Packers shut out by the Vikings for just the second time ever.